Hi, good evening everyone. Today is the day 41 of Gear Up Mains Answer Writing. In this week, we are going to discuss science and technology question that has been asked by UPSC in the previous year. The science and technology part is mainly related to the current affairs. If you see the question of the science and technology in the UPSC, you will find there are different themes they ask in the paper. But some of the common themes are also there, like related to the biotechnology. It may be related to the IT. So these are some of the themes that are repeated in the science and technology also. Even it's question related to the James Webb Telescope. Even it's related to the space station or question related to the cellulose. There are some of the unconventional question also, like the question on cellulose has been asked in the last year by the UPSC. These are the unconventional question. You cannot be prepared for these kind of the question. But the source of the question was exactly the NCERT. If you are going through the NCERT of the 11th class, you will find that the question on the cellular degradation completely mentioned in the 11th class biology NCERT. Okay, so let's what's the question for today. Today's question is each year a large amount of plant material, cellulose, is deposited on the surface of the planet Earth. What are the natural process this cellulose undergoes before yielding carbon dioxide, water and other products? The question is simple. But it is not easy to prepare these kind of the questions. These are the unconventional questions, we can say, asked by the UPSC. So this was a game changer. This was a tricky questions, we can say, but it is directly from the NCERT. Also, we can skip these kind of the question if we have no information about this, or if you are from the biology background, if you are from the medical background, you can easily attempt these kind of the question also. Okay, so let's see what exactly is the demand of the question. As usual, we are dividing the question into three parts. The first part will be the introduction part, the second will be the body part, and the third will be the conclusion. First of all, let's see in the body part what we will write in the body part. The question is asking a very small thing in it, so we need to explain that explanation. What are the natural processes the cellulose undergo before yielding the carbon dioxides and the water? So in the body part, we need to explain the different processes which break down the cellulose, into carbon dioxide plus water, and the water. So we can mention the different kind of the process. It may be the fragmentation, it may be the catabolism, it may be through the humidification also, it may be due to the high temperature also. So there are the various processes through which the cellulose can be break down into the multiple parts. So this is the mainly we will explain in the body part. But before going to the body part, there is a line written here. Each year a large amount of plant material, cellulose, is deposited on the surface of the planet Earth. We need to be adjust this line as well. So we will write something about the cellulose in the introduction. We will explain the process of degradation of cellulose in the body part, or even we can make a diagram here simply if you are aware about the degradation of the cellulose or the fragmentation of the cellulose. Okay, so let's see what we will write in the introduction. In introduction, according to the demand of the question, we will write the cellulose is a part mainly related to the plants. It in the form of the twig, in the form of the fruits, in the form of the leaves, and in some of the other forms it is found and compiled on the earth. That is written in the statement itself, deposited on the surface of the earth. So it deposited in the different forms. It may be in the form of fruit, it may be in the form of the plant twig, it may be formed in the leaves. So it can be in the one form or the another form. It is deposited on the surface of the earth. Further, we will write about this cellulose. the cellulose is break down by the bacteria, by fungi. They release the enzyme, cellulase enzyme. They release the cellulase enzyme which degrade the cellulose into the byproduct of carbon dioxide, water and energy. So this we can write into the introduction. Okay, then also we need to write a cycle here, and you can also write the cellulose is the major part of plant cell, major part of plant cell wall. It is a major part of plant cell wall. So in the introduction we can write about, even it's about the fruits, leaves or plant twigs which form the major part of the cellulose. It's compiled on the earth's surface, and the cellulose is the major part of the plant cell wall. It is break down by the enzyme released by bacteria and the fungi. The name is cellulase, which break down cellulose into carbon dioxide and water. So this we can write in the introduction itself. After writing the introduction, I will suggest if you make a diagram which show the breakdown of the cellulose under a different condition, it will fetch you the extra marks, because the question is completely about this, how the cellulose is break down into the carbon dioxide and the water. Okay, so let's see how the cellulose is break down into the multiple parts. So if we are taking a cellulose, it is in the form of the polysaccharides, means it is formed by the multiple unit of the glucose, polysaccharides. These polysaccharides is break down by, these polysaccharides are break down into the oligosaccharides. These polysaccharides are break down into oligosaccharides, and these oligosaccharides are break down into monosaccharides. These are break down into monosaccharides, and monosaccharides is a form of glucose. Monosaccharide is a form of glucose which is represented by a formula C6H12O6, which is represented by a formula C6H12O6. So this is the process how a major unit of cellulose in the form of polysaccharide is break down into the oligosaccharide, then into the monosaccharide, and finally into the glucose. And the enzyme work here, what is the name of the enzyme which work here? The enzyme name is cellulase. The name of the enzyme is cellulase, which is breaking these units into the smaller units. Which is breaking these units into the smaller units. So cellulase is breaking polysaccharides into the oligosaccharides, oligosaccharides into the monosaccharides, and the monosaccharides into glucose. And these cellulase enzymes are released by fungi. These are released by fungi, or we can say by bacteria. So this is a normal process of breakdown of cellulose into the glucose unit. Now further, this glucose unit can be break into the carbon dioxide and water. This glucose unit is break down into carbon dioxide and water, but there can be the various condition. There can be the various condition under which condition this glucose molecule is break down. The number one condition we can say, in the presence of oxygen. In the presence of oxygen. Second condition will be in the limited amount of oxygen. In the limited amount of oxygen. And third is the absence of oxygen. Absence of oxygen. So if we are breaking down the cellulose into the three different categories, first in the presence of oxygen, second is the limited amount of oxygen, and the third is the absence of oxygen. So if it break down into the presence of oxygen, then it will directly release carbon dioxide plus water. It will directly release the carbon dioxide and water. This large molecule of glucose C6H12O6 will be break down into carbon dioxide plus water. This will break down into carbon dioxide plus water. This is the process when this happen under the presence of the oxygen. If this is happen under the absence of the oxygen, it will release the ethanol plus carbon dioxide. It will release the ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus water. If this happen under the absence of oxygen, and these are also releasing the energy with it. These are releasing the energy molecule also. These are releasing energy molecule also. And under the third process, when it is done by in the limited oxygen, it releases the lactic acid. It releases the lactic acid in the limited oxygen. It releases the lactic acid. So this is the process. So this is the process of breakdown of major unit of cellulose, that is the polysaccharides, into the smaller unit and finally into the carbon dioxides and the water. And this is the question demand. If you are making this diagram, you are fulfilling completely the question demand. You are addressing the first line that is written in the question. The material is depositing on the earth's surface and it's break down into carbon dioxides and the water. And we need to explain the process as well. There can be a different kind of the process, but the mechanism will be the same. This is a mechanism through which the polysaccharides are break down into carbon dioxides and the water. So these kind of the diagram, these kind of the illustration, if the question is unconventional and they are asking these kind of things, so you can make these kind of diagrams and explain the process completely. Okay, now come to the process. Which are required here. Now the question is asking, we need to list down the process under which the cellulose is break down into carbon dioxide and the water. So there can be the various process. There can be the various natural process through which these cellulose is break down into the carbon dioxide and the water. So natural process undergo by cellulose. First is the fragmentation. Here fragmentation means is breakdown. Fragmentation means breakdown. Means the breakdown of the larger unit of the cellulose into the smaller unit. And finally into carbon dioxide and the water. And this breakdown is done by the bacteria and the fungi. This breakdown is done by the bacteria and fungi. As we seen in this process, how the cellulose break down into the smaller part, the same process is undergoing here. So we need to write the names as the question suggested. The natural process through undergone by the cellulose. Then the catabolism, the same means the larger units are breaking into the smaller units and then finally releasing the carbon dioxide and the water under the catabolism process. So these are the examples of breaking down of the cellulose into the smaller part, that is the carbon dioxides and the water. Then the humification. Humus is a mineral rich content. It is a mineral rich organic content which finally break down into the water and the carbon dioxides. Accumulation of the organic matter. These are a dead organic matter, which are break down by the detritivores. Detritivores are those bacteria which break down the dead organic matters, like the leaves. They convert the leaves into fertilizer. So accumulation of dead organic matters are break down by the detritivores. Even the fragmentation can also be done by the detritivores. So these are the processes through which the cellulose is break down into the multiple parts and finally into the carbon dioxides and the water. Then finally the photosynthesis is the major process through which under the mitochondria the process happens and it's break down into the carbon dioxides and the water. And the other process we can see here, the process of leaching. Through even the leaching process, the cellulose is break down into the multiple parts. Similar in the process of the mineralization, in the process of weathering of the some of the other things that lead to the weathering, and that lead to the breakdown of the cellulose into the CO2 and the H2O. In the case of the fungi, it releases the cellulase enzyme, and which break again into CO2 into H2O. And finally we come to the anaerobic condition, as we discussed in this diagram, as we discussed here. In the case of the absence of the oxygen, this is known as the anaerobic condition, and under the anaerobic condition it will break down into the same thing, the carbon dioxide, ethanol and the water. So these are the various processes through which the cellulose is break down into carbon dioxide and the water. So we need to be mention about these things. These are natural process, and the good thing, this is mentioned into your NCERT books. This is mentioned into your NCERT books, but these are the unconventional questions. You can also skip these questions, but if you're comfortable, then you can answer question according to this we discussed here. In the conclusion part of the question, you will write about the cellulase, the mechanism. We will write about the cellulase or the cellulose is the major part of the plant cell. It composes the cell wall, and it helps in the degradation, and it can be degraded into multiple forms, maybe in the aerobic and anaerobic forms, and also in the presence of oxygen, and even the limited amount of the oxygen, which release the different kind of the products. In the some form it's form the CO2 and the H2O, in the some form it's release the lactic acid. So by conventionally, by simple conclusion or direct conclusion, you can conclude the answer here. So this is the complete idea about this question. If you're finding these kind of the question, so you can form these kind of a diagram also. So the question is about the cellulase. So we discuss about what exactly the question demands. If you are regularly attending these sessions, then you will find out there is a specific way to break down the question, how we can complete the question demand, what required in the introduction, what required in the body part, how we can break the body part into multiple parts and write the answer. So if you are breaking the question into multiple parts, means there is a coherence in your answer. Without the coherence, this looks like you're writing the first part, X thing in the first part, then coming to the Y things like in the Z thing in the second part, but there's a Y is missing. That is a coherence between the answer. You can also write these answers and can submit to the master program of the Edukemy on the website. So free of cost, your answer will be evaluated by our expert mentors. So we will meet tomorrow at the same time, 6 o'clock, with the new question which will be related to the science and technology. Till then, bye bye, take care. Okay, we will meet tomorrow again. Thank you very much everyone.